Matt, let's jump over to you. I was so anxious to get to lessons learned because I know the audience really likes that. Forgot to highlight you on priorities for Illumio that you're seeing sort of internally, maybe what you're being asked of, and certainly right behind that, give us the lessons learned.
So I think I'm going to start with the second question and go backwards. So
Sure.
I think the biggest lesson learned is our adversaries are looking at what our focus is and then going for our weak spot, right? It's like if you're boxing somebody, you look for that opening and you go for that spot. Our adversaries just taught us a huge lesson, which is, we've been focusing on the user. And so they went behind the user, and we talked about the supply chain problem that we just hit, right? So I think the big lesson that we've learned is we need to learn to walk and chew gum at the same time. What does that mean? That means not just think about the end user, but also think about what the end user is connecting to. And the supply chain problem, because they're really going after the stuff in the data center. OPM was about what was in the data center. Sunburst was about what was in the data center, because that's where Orion and so let me talk about, how you sort of solve that problem. The answer is it starts off with that visibility. And Ron touched on that, and as did Hemen. However, let's really, the word visibility to me is sort of like saying blue. There's many different shades of blue. So let's talk about what I mean by that. There's device visibility, what's on my network, what's attaching to my network, and then what are those devices connecting to? There's going to be some amount of devices, and they're going to have to connect in. And then from an end user perspective, we're seeing stuff like zero trust network access to solve that problem. But that doesn't stop what's behind that access point, that proxy sitting in front of the data center. And Sunburst took advantage of the fact that we've really only focused on the perimeter. And what happens behind that perimeter is really the attacker's open domain. So their entire goal is to get behind that perimeter, to get to where the data is in the data center. So visibility to me means looking at what are the normal communication patterns and then stopping that which is abnormal. And once again, that's a mindset problem. So so in terms of priorities for this year, for me, it's really, once again, turning back to education, really thinking about restricting lateral movement to only those connections which should be allowed, rather than sort of allowing, that internet mindset of, hey, once you're connected, you can go anywhere you want. We've really focused on the end user in. We haven't really talked about how to solve that problem in mass inside the data center. What Ron talked about in terms of like an unpatched system, how to isolate it. Well, what if isolating it, how to isolate it without touching the physical network itself, because that could have a much broader impact. So this is why Zero Trust 207 is incredibly important. And in fact, we're working with this at being their Zero Trust reference architecture, really focusing on the data center and cloud environments, really thinking about how to compartmentalize these networks that were uncompartmentalized in the data center in the unclass region of the infrastructure.